U.S. political parties. Like most of the world is a broad center-right and a broad center-left party. In America, one of these parties is the Democrats that was founded as the Andrew Jackson Fan Club, and another one is the Republican Party that was founded in opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. It stayed like this for the longest time, up until the Civil War, and the Republicans started becoming more business-friendly and the Democrats more worker-friendly. And later on, a divide over civil rights. The last gasp of the left-wing Republicans was Teddy Roosevelt, who left office thinking William Howard Taft would be his natural successor. But Taft was his own person, and he was very pro-business and took away a lot of the progressive things that Teddy did to America, and even sent in the army to deal with protests, so Teddy was not very happy. As well as frustrations about Mexico raiding into America, Teddy decided to make his own party, the Progressive Party. A common nickname is the Bull Moose Party, given a quote that Teddy said while surviving an attempt on him. And with Theodore's mass popularity and William's lack of popularity, he ended up getting the election for a third term, but technically his second elected. He got instantly back to work, speaking softly but carry a big stick, to try and bring some stability to their southern border with Mexico, enacting the Volunteer Act. They're technically not invading Mexico, they're all volunteers, reestablishing the Rough Riders. And after only a few months, they're able to secure their southern border with a progressive who actually cares about Mexico. But then the banking panic in 1913 hit, but Teddy was able to fix it, with the Federal Reserve Act, the Federal Farm and Loan Act, implementing the 8-hour workday, restricting child labor, despite the fact a lot of terrible people these days want to repeal that, and not escalating the bluff war. But World War I starts. Teddy wants to get in, but Congress says no, and passes the Neutrality Act. But at least Theodore gets to see that canal he ordered open. He spends most of 1915 campaigning to enter the Great War, especially after Germany's invasion of Belgium. The Volunteer Act comes back, and a division of the Rough Riders gets sent in early spring 1915, most of which never returned home. But thanks to Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare in the Lusitania, in 1916, Congress finally enters the war, and Teddy straight up resigns from the presidency to lead the front line, leaving his vice president, Hiram Johnson, to become the 29th president. But 1916 was also an election year, so he spent the majority of that time just campaigning, and he was no Theodore Roosevelt, so he got resoundingly walloped by Woodrow Wilson. As the 30th president, Woody enacted the federal income tax to pay for the war, as well as filling the cabinet with pro-segregationalists. While at the same time, he got a lot of praise for leading America through World War I and his 14 points and going to the Congress of Vienna in December 1918. Leading to the creation of the League of Nations, which despite Woody wanting, Congress said no. Also, Woody had a stroke. So really, most of the end of his presidency was mostly due to his wife Edith, like the passing of the 19th Amendment allowing women to vote, and the beginning of Prohibition, the banning of alcohol in America. There is a single-issue party in America dedicated to Prohibition, and they finally got what they wanted without even getting elected. The Roaring Twenties was a great time to be rich and white. The 31st president, Warren Hardy, and his vice president, A. Bacon Falls, were very popular until their second term. Midway through, the big oil scandal, the Teapot Dome scandal, came to light. No, they weren't smuggling oil in teapots. It's this place that kinda looks like a teapot next to a large deposit of oil that was set aside for the Navy, which A. Bacon Fall was selling. So he resigned in shame, and eventually Warren also resigned, leading to the 32nd president, Calvin Coolidge, the Secretary of State that had no idea what was going on. He picked Charles Curtis as his vice president, the very first biracial vice president, being half Native American, which led to this problematic photo of Calvin in a headdress, despite Curtis being the namesake to the Curtis Act, which opened up the sale of Native American land, especially the 5 tribes in Oklahoma's. Even though Curtis was not very happy with the final act and even pushed for an early version of the Equal Rights Amendment that was kind of tabled by the Senate, Calvin remained quiet mostly and was very popular to the point he got a third term, but second elected. But during that third term, the Great Depression and Dust Bowl came through, and he responded very poorly to not at all. But at least the construction of the Coolidge Dam began. Charles Curtis ended up losing an election to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR, being of the Progressive Party, but he actually entered in coalition with John Nance Garner of the Democrats, establishing the New Deal reforms of culture and economy, which was just beneficial for everyone, like beginning the process to ditch the gold standard, establishing Social Security, and implementing the 21st Amendment to bring alcohol back because prohibition just led to people bootlegging and lots of crime. Despite being proven their platform does not work, the Prohibition Party still exists today for no good reason, as well as a lot of counties in America have weird alcohol laws. But the Democrats became sour on FDR due to him trying to pack the Supreme Court and running for a third term. But the voters and the Democratic establishment still really liked FDR, so Cactus Jack was replaced, and instead Harry Truman became the new vice president, which John Nance Garner was totally not bitter about at all. While the Republicans were divided on is the New Deal good, with William Taft representing the conservatives who say no, and Wendell Willkie, who gets the nomination, saying that it's good in theory but implemented poorly. This didn't really work out for him. So FDR became the first and only president elected to 3 full terms. A year later, Pearl Harbor, so America entered World War II. And at the same time, Wendell Willkie actually talked to FDR and they'd established a grand coalition between progressives, Republicans, and Democrats, with Willkie becoming the new Secretary of State. For 3 years until he died of a heart attack, which broke the Grand Coalition with the selection of Robert Taft, the son of William Howard Taft, a conservative, anti-war, anti-New Deal, and isolationist, supported by conservative Democrats known as the Texas Regulars. This didn't really help them out at all. So FDR became the first and only president elected to 4 terms. He didn't get to celebrate too long because he died within 3 months. So Harry Truman became the 34th president, with Harry Wallace becoming the new head of the Progressive Party and the new vice president. They stuck together throughout the end of the war, establishing the Truman Doctrine, which called for peace and rebuilding. The army was desegregated, which really upset the remaining conservatives in the Democratic Party, who left under strong ferment to establish the Dixiecrats, or the States' Rights Party, the states' rights to discriminate against people. He did the Berlin airlift, but also dropped 2 nukes on Japan, kind of started the Cold War with the Civil War in Greece. Harry and Harry also didn't really get along and only stuck together because of WW2. Henry Wallace felt like he should be the new president because he's the one who inherited the Progressive Party, the party of FDR, and felt that Truman wasn't going hard enough with civil rights and wanted to abolish the House of Un-American Activities. So his critics named him a secret communist. Truman fired him and appointed Alben Barkley as his new vice president, officially ending the New Deal coalition with the progressives going their own way. Meanwhile, the Republicans officially split over those who supported interventionism and the New Deal and isolationists who didn't support it, with the latter forming the Liberal Republicans, a Jacksonian Republican Party, for personal freedoms and small government, selecting Thomas Dewey and Earl Warren against Robert Taft, who was trying to rematch, and he only won Missouri, with the election itself being very messy, with many reporters not even knowing who actually won, until eventually it was called that Thomas Dewey won. As the 35th president, Thomas Dewey was pragmatic and business-friendly, keeping up with a lot of the New Deal programs and even the Truman Doctrine, establishing the beginnings to the interstate highway system, which is a yay for connecting America, but boo in the long term because now cities are so dedicated to cars that it's become completely unwalkable, which has more so contributed to America's obesity rate than actually the deep-fried Oreos that you can't walk off. The biggest accomplishment being passing the 22nd Amendment, saying that yes, Harry Truman was the president and the vice president always inherits even in a coalition, but also no man is good 3 times. No matter how short your first term was, presidents from now on only get 2 terms, which many people were upset about at the time, but in the long run, it definitely works out because you don't want anyone trying to be a dictator. The Korean War started under Dewey, and he nearly also got into the Indochina War, as well as being anti-national health care, and despite speaking out against lynchings, he was very slow to do anything about it and integrate the U.S., And the McCarthy trials to root out communists was seen as just a evil witch trial. A lot of people really started to hate Dewey. The Lavender Party was founded by gay activists to try and secure gay rights. War hero Ike Eisenhower became the 36th president with Richard Nixon, after which Dewey retired and traveled the world. His replacement, Nelson Rockefeller, is kind of the big reason why the liberal Republicans are often called the Rockefeller Republicans, due to his personal popularity and the fact he'll stay around till the 70s. Ike had very broad beliefs, like increasing the Truman Doctrine and American influence around the world, and forcing America's motto to be "In God We Trust" to a secular nation, and forcing kids to say the Pledge of Allegiance in school. But also, he had very liberal ideas like expanding Social Security and funding sciences, and America saw a lot of prosperity by actually taxing the rich. He even spoke out about the military-industrial complex. Nixon lost the election to the young, handsome Democrat John F. Kennedy, who actually opened up a new coalition with the progressive Lyndon Baines Johnson. The 37th president didn't really start off great because he inherited the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a complete disaster to overthrow the communist government that overthrew the previous Cuban government, which itself was an American-backed government that was overthrowing the previous government. JFK also expanded American involvement in the Vietnam conflict. It was also to very calmly talk down the Cuban Missile Crisis, which filled Americans with such stress and knocked 20 years off their lives. That and all the cigarettes people were smoking at the time. Kennedy also limited nuclear testing, establishing the Peace Corps, and oversaw the full-scale civil rights movement, which led directly to the establishment of the Black Panthers, a Marxist civil rights group, who many at the time considered a violent terrorist group, but also these are the people who directly are the reason why schools provide lunches. Kennedy was an idealist and wanted better for Americans and to go to the moon. And very infamously, he was assassinated in one of the biggest conspiracy theories ever. LBJ, as the 38th president, basically did everything Kennedy wanted to do, which might have included expanding the war in Vietnam, but more importantly, establishing the Civil Rights Act, and other progressive stuff like the war on poverty, which he was able to get passed basically via threatening people. George Wallace and the Dixiecrats hated this. Nelson Rockefeller actually wanted to go into coalition with the Republicans under Barry Goldwater to kind of have their own JFK LBJ, but Goldwater actually voted against the Civil Rights Act, saying businesses shouldn't hire people they don't want to, and he wanted to use nukes in Vietnam, which totally worked out for him. It should also be noted that Rockefeller chose Margaret Chase Smith as the very first female running mate to a major political party. Despite Barry losing pretty badly, he ended up influencing conservative parties with his conservative values but liberal economic ideas. This election also saw the creation of the NAR, the New Apostolic Reform Party, a far-right Christian nationalist party, who nominated Joseph Coors, the grandson of the guy who made Coors Light, who was literally described by his own brother as being a little bit right of Attila the Hun in terms of politics. The American Solidarity Party is a Christian Democratic Party, kind of the Catholic alternative to the NAR, who are evangelical Protestants. And then the Mormons are represented by Mormon United, later called LDS United, but no one calls them that, who also took a very hard stance against the civil rights movement because Mormons have a very particular belief about black people. LBJ had a very hard time in his second term because people just were sick of the Vietnam War. The progressives and Democrats were breaking up violently. It was just a total mess that led to Nixon's back, baby! Becoming the 39th president, and despite his conservative leanings, he actually established the Environmental Protection Agency, pulled out of Vietnam, opened dialogue with China, and lowering construction of nukes. Also due to a support of Israel, this led to an oil embargo. But a lot of people still hated him, so everyone and their dog decided to run against him. Surely Chris Holmes saw a lot of people's negativity towards the Black Panthers and decided to take much of the party and form the Black American Party, trying to rebrand themselves. Eugene McCarthy felt that the progressives and Democrats were accepting of hippies and draft dodgers too much and formed the Farmer Labor Party to get back to their roots as the working class. Patsy Mink founded the Justice Party, a center-left environmentalist party, and then in the 90s she helped support the Hawaiian Independence Party. George Wallace survived an assassination attempt on him. He seemingly regretted his racist actions and denounced the Dixiecrats, founding the center-right Blue Dog Party. Peace and Freedom, which was founded as a socialist anti-war party, has become more prominent, surprisingly, after the war. But even working together, all these parties got completely creamed, and George McGovern of the Progressive Party only won Massachusetts and D.C. In 1973, the Supreme Court ruled the banning of the Communist Party violated its freedom of speech, as well as McCarthy trials from the 50s and 60s was also unconstitutional, leading to now American parties can only be banned if they go against the Constitution or they're declaring violence against people. So now the Mormons and the states' rights parties are kind of in an awkward situation with that whole Civil Rights Act. So the states' rights party has to kind of reinvent itself a little. Mormon President Spencer W. Campbell had to just very reluctantly allow black people to be ordained in the Mormon church now, otherwise they'll lose their tax exemption. Well, the states' rights party are taking a book from Barry Goldwater that say they're not racist, they just want companies to have the freedom to hire whoever they want or not hire whoever they want against these DEI hires. Also, Nixon was caught up in a scandal trying to bug the Watergate Hotel to listen into his opponents, becoming super paranoid about all these new left-wing parties, and then he tried withholding evidence. This led to a lot of politicians resigning, including Nelson Rockefeller. And eventually even Nixon decided to retire when it was pretty clear that they were going to vote no confidence in him. And a few months earlier, his vice president, Spiro Agnew, was also resigned for different reasons, so Gerald Ford became the very first president to be both vice and president without being elected. Becoming the 40th president with VP Bob Dole, he's kind of seen as an American Joe Clark who could have been fine in any other circumstance, but he also pardoned Nixon, so this immediately led to his vote of no confidence, which sent America right back to the election, and in 1974, Ford lost to Jimmy Carter, a dark horse outsider peanut farmer that no one really expected to win and become the 41st president, especially when he was running mates with Eugene McCarthy last election. And speaking of, Jimmy selected Geraldine Ferraro as his vice president, becoming the very first woman to hold that position. They dealt with stagflation, nuclear deterrence, created the Department of Education, which Republicans hated. The Koch brothers bringing the Libertarian Party into relevance for personal freedoms and economic conservatism. Also at this time, the founding of the Indigenous Harmony Party, originally known as the Indian Harmony Party, which is a Native American political party to keep old traditions alive and keep the reserves doing well. Jimmy was re-elected in '76 against Republican John B. Anderson, gave the Panama Canal back to Panama, brokered a peace between Egypt and Israel. Also, by the end of his second term, Iran was overthrown by religious fundamentalists, leading to the Iran hostage crisis and the Iran oil crisis, which was seen as far worse in America, because they don't have enough go juice for their cars. So Ferraro and her running mate Walter Mondale did not have the greatest time, especially going against very popular Ronald Reagan, and she got absolutely smoked. The 42nd president, Ronald Reagan, was greatly supported by NAR candidate Pat Robertson, the televangelist. He believed in high military spending and to offset it with trickle-down economics. By cutting taxes to the ultra-wealthy, all their money will trickle down to the common man. In reality, this didn't work at all, and now the richer are richer, and now just sitting on their money they don't have to pay in taxes, which ballooned the debt. But people at the time really didn't care because Reagan was just so charismatic and funny and smart and yada yada, which led to a very easy re-election against a dude named Mo Udall. The '84 election also saw the founding of the Latino Rights Party, a big tent party dedicated to the rights of the growing Latino American population, mostly from Cuba and Mexico. They're pro-worker, pro-immigration, and pro-Spanish language stuff. Reagan's VP, George H.W. Bush, felt he was on easy streak, until the breaking news of the Iran-Contra affair. where the U.S. sold guns to Iran, who then sent the profit to the Contras in Nicaragua, because Congress didn't want to aid the Contras due to them selling a little bit of the Coca-Cola, which the FBI bought, which ended up fueling the drug epidemic of the 80s, which ironically Reagan was campaigning against. So a lot of left parties decided to capitalize on this. They called themselves the Seven Democratic Liberators. The media called them the Seven Dwarves, due to their big personalities, big differences from each other, and kind of cartoonish looks. Especially their leader, Michael Dukakis, in this very big helmet and his small head. That costed the election. 43rd President George H.W. Bush said, "Read my lips. No new taxes." And then he raised taxes. His VP was so upset and angry at this, he left. So Bush barely did anything before he got voted of no confidence, going back to the election, and Gary Hart won, with Paul Simon and his bow tie, which was later parodied by Bill Nye the Science Guy. The 44th president saw the Malta Summit, which democratized the Soviet Union, which is seen as the end of the Cold War, as well as the same time the Tiananmen Square massacre led to collapse of communist China and reunification with Taiwan. He was pretty popular at first, but then reporters dug into his personal life, and it turns out Gary Hart was cheating on his wife. He was ashamed of the scandal and didn't run for a re-election campaign. So in '92, the Democrats selected Bill Clinton. Republicans had Dan Quayle and Stephen Forbes. '92 also saw the founding of the Aloha Ain Party, or Love of the Land Party, or AAP, a progressive Hawaiian independence party that's dedicated to preserving and promoting Hawaiian culture. There's also a conservative counterpart, the Hawaiian National Party, whose founders later found Aloha crypto coin. Then out of nowhere, tech billionaire Ross Perot came out of nowhere and decided to run for president, forming the Reform Party, on a platform of economic protectionism against NAFTA. Progressive candidate Al Gore actually became very close friends with Bill Clinton, to the point where they decided to not just coalition, they merged parties into the new Democratic Party, and won a pretty decent majority. The NDP rose to popularity on center to progressive ideas like globalism and healthcare, triumphing neoliberalism. But then they got screwed over in the House by Republicans and Reform. So like always with politics, they have to work around the haters or just throw in the towel. Compromising, like instead of just lifting the gay ban on the military, we have Don't Ask, Don't Tell to make it harder to enforce the ban. And despite Bill's anti-war stance, they ended up sending troops to the Yugoslavia Civil War. But he was able to keep a couple promises, like the assault weapons ban, which angered a lot of Republicans, because gun violence got cut in half, which saw the creation of the Texas National Party, a far-right Texas Independent Party, and the National Association for Gun Rights, or NAGR. An extremist group with direct ties to militias that people like to pretend they don't have it because they love guns so much. And the Constitutional Party, an ultra-conservative party. Also the scandal of Bill Clinton cheating on his wife, with Monica Lewinsky and lying about it. Republicans selected Bob Dole, the former vice president, to run, and he really hammered on this. He did a little bit better, but not still great, and came in third still. He tried launching not a vote of no confidence, but a straight-up remove from office impeachment, which passed the House but not the Senate, showing that America has greatly liberalized since Gary Hart and really didn't care much, especially because America was just raking in the money because of Bill. The '96 election also saw the creation of the hardcore environmentalist party, the Green Party, and a single-issue party about legalizing marijuana. Brian Moore was able to unite the majority of socialist parties in America into the United Social Democratic Alliance, while Bernie Sanders, as leader of peace and freedom, rejected it. The Communist Party of America has never really been popular because of the Cold War, but was finally able to elect its first and so far only representative to California, Tupac Shakur. For the 2000 election, Al Gore easily got the NDP nomination, while Ross Perot decided 2 times was enough and he retired from politics, returning to Perot Systems and eventually buying out Dell. The Reform Party voters, for whatever reason, decided to select as their candidate former States' Right Party member, former Republican, current caveman paleoconservative Pat Buchanan. And for his vice president nominee was Georgiana Dorshux, who literally wanted to ban computers, despite the Reform Party being founded by a computer person.
And I don't think it would be possible to operate without computers and fax machines successfully today.
But we did it before.
We didn't do what we do today, though.
Why can't computer people understand that this is detrimental to our well-being?
So with the Democrats going full progressive and the Reform going very conservative, the Republicans decided to try and cut even with John McCain, the maverick who was a POW in Vietnam, as well as popular governor of Texas and son of former President George W. Bush, to appease the conservatives. There was a lot of drama at the time that he was born in the Panama Canal Zone, but because of the Constitution, you only have to be the children of American citizens, not actually completely born in the U.S.
I'm John McCain, and I approve this message.
The 2000 election was incredibly narrow. Either side could have easily won by a hair. All eyes were on the Libertarian state of New Hampshire. Ballot papers weren't fully filled in or pushed out. Because of the terrible format, a lot of people voted for the wrong candidate, thinking they were voting for someone else. There was also Florida, but it was pretty obviously a lot of shenanigans with Jeb Bush shredding votes. But eventually McCain became the 46th president, aligned with Harry Brown, the Libertarian candidate for his Secretary of Commerce, and Alberto Gonzalez from the Latino Rights Party as his Attorney General. But only a month into his presidency, John McCain had a blood clot and had to go into surgery. So Vice President George Bush and Secretary of State Dick Cheney had to run the show during the 9/11 attacks. This directly led to the War on Terror, invading Afghanistan, and later McCain invaded Iraq on the assumption that there's weapons of mass destruction, which there weren't, but they still ended up overthrowing Saddam Hussein anyway, claiming that mission was accomplished. Even though it wasn't, because troops remained there, nation building, which didn't work at all, and they were still fighting in Afghanistan, and also sent troops to the Kosovo Independence War from Yugoslavia. And statewide, they passed the No Child Left Behind Act, which was good on paper, but in reality now means that schools now prioritize test scores and making kids get the high number rather than actually teaching them anything. But he did get passed a reform that would limit campaign finances, which the Supreme Court overturned in 2009. Bush was asked to retire instead of running again in 2004, due to a bunch of fumbling interviews calling the War on Terror a crusade, so McCain selected a young mayor from Alaska, Sarah Palin. George Bush's retirement was actually kind of good for him because he ended up becoming the commissioner for baseball from 2005 all the way up until his retirement in 2017, famously tossing out the first pitch at the legendary American League's Boston Red Sox versus the Federal League's Cleveland Green Sox game. The progressives and liberals broke up over a war again. Howard Dean was selected as the new leader of the Progressive Party, famously voting against the wars, wanting universal health care and wanting to open up dialogue with North Vietnam. But then this happened. These days, that would literally be absolutely nothing, but for whatever reason at the time, people thought that was just the funniest thing, which absolutely tanked the progressives' performance. The NDP selected John Kerry and John Edwards. Despite criticisms for the wars, they awkwardly voted for them, and were kind of flip-floppy on a lot of issues, and honestly, the two Johns really weren't that much different from the other John.
Hey, you got that Botox, but I still won 3 Purple Hearts.
So McCain ended up remaining president, with Sarah Palin being the only second woman to be vice president. But it really wasn't that different from before, with Sarah still being seen as a bumbling moron.
What newspapers and magazines did you regularly read?
All of them, any of them that have been in front of me over all these years.
He did get passed a bipartisan border bill, and he did repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but seemingly forgot to legalize gay marriage, like he promised. He did try passing an early version of the Green New Deal, but it completely failed in the Senate with his own coalition. a scandal with his Indigenous Affairs Secretary extorting money from reservations. He wanted to pull out of Iraq, but really didn't. He was blamed for a slow response to Katrina. The housing market bubble burst, sending troops to aid Georgia's independence war from the Soviet Union, and a lot of evidence that he really wanted to go to war with Iran, showing that McCain really is this war hawk that the Democrats kept trying to tell people but never listened to. Sarah Palin attempted to run for president, with Michelle Bachmann being the first double women candidacy for a major party, which you would think, yay, progress, but in reality these two were massive Karens. Meanwhile, the Democrats ended up having an even bigger surprise. Dark horse candidate Barack Obama became the first African-American frontrunner, campaigning on a message of hope and change and hope, which really resonated with a lot of people, selecting Joe Biden, and he absolutely did super well. He micromanaged the economy, which did well in the long term, pulled out of Iraq, mostly, created the Affordable Care Act to give people medicine, mostly. Gay marriage became legal in America thanks to the Supreme Court, and expanded military drone strikes, which led to the death of Osama bin Laden. Entered the Paris Climate Agreement to try and stop being so bad to the planet, try and make a nuclear deal with Iran to stop that. With the majority of Republican voters leaving for the liberal Republicans or the Libertarians, Sarah Palin was kind of in a pickle. So she decided to reform the Republican Party in her own image, forming the Tea Party, named after the Boston Tea Party, but especially because the party was at the time ran by two women, the media thought this was hilarious. It was an alt-right, conservative, anti-establishment movement that was very loud in the media. And awkwardly, despite founding the party, Sarah was not selected to be the candidate for 2011. Instead, Newt Gingrich and son of Libertarian Rand Paul. Newt was also the Republican head of the House during the 90s. But what was more embarrassing is Sarah tried running for the governor of Alaska and lost to a social dem, literally named Santa Claus. The liberal Republicans selected Mitt Romney. Yes, he's Mormon. No, he was not in the Mormon United. The conservative vote was pretty divided because of everyone. But also notably, two parties really stood out, the Latino Rights Party and American Solidarity, because of the ever-growing Latino presence in America, with American Solidarity moderating a ton, still being pro-life and anti-euthanasia, but has now stand as a party indifferent to gay marriage rather than being hardcore against it, and being into social welfare, while the Latino Rights Party has become more and more conservative. Since the election of 2000, ironically given their base, the party has become very anti-immigration in a pull-up-the-drawbridge-behind-us mentality, with the federal party clearly just trying to be in power, not caring actually about the Latinos they represent. Obama remained incredibly popular for the most part, but he also definitely had a lot of struggles in his second term, like gun violence, which he spoke out against, which conservatives thought was not a problem, which is why McCain let the assault weapons ban expire in the 2000s, as well as despite the fact that there's an African American in the White House, black people still faced a lot of discrimination. Obama tried his best to fix it, but Rome wasn't built in a day. And Obama's presidency was coming to the end of its days. Hillary Clinton won the nomination for the NDP, the party her husband founded, but a lot of people were not happy with this, seeing her as elitist and out of touch, and really wanted instead to be nominated Martin O'Malley. The progressive candidate wasn't interesting at all, and neither really was the two main conservative options. At the same time, the Peace and Freedom Party with Bernie Sanders and United Social Dems with Elizabeth Warren became as popular as ever. Also, there was the Animal Protection League, a breakoff from the Greens that were really into animal rights. The Reform Party has had not a great time since the disaster of Pat Buchanan. The Federal Party was seen as a joke, going from a fiscally responsible party to a hardcore conservative far-right party, while in the states and in the House and Senate, it really struggled to find one identity for itself other than electing the cast of Predator to be governors. And even then, they were from the center of the party and didn't really like the Federal Party. And in America, all the political parties that do receive electoral votes have open primaries to the public, and those that don't get any have just closed primaries to the party. So, in one of the most significant events in the last 10 years in American politics, we saw the infamous video of a guy going down the escalator in the Reform Party headquarters, and given that they had no representatives in the House or Senate at the time, he basically got the nominee just by default. And that man was Mike Lindell, a man that had zero political background at all, and he was known for making My Pillow. He was blunt and rude and an isolationist nationalist that spoke in very suspicious terms, but because of this, people really liked him. Well, at the same time, a lot of people hated him, and so the California Reform Party reimagined itself as the California National Party, an independence party for California. Former reform candidates ran as protest votes. The new Whig Party was established, not really with any connection to the old Whig Party, and kind of became the veteran affair political party ran by Richard Ojeda. Just about everyone got a little bit of an electoral college vote, but Hillary lost because she very smugly underestimated her support in the Rust Belt, and a lot of people felt she was out of touch, and Lindell campaigned on draining the swamp from all of the elitists, and then surrounded himself with some of the most out-of-touch elitist people you could possibly find in America. Immediately tried taking away Obama's accomplishments for very no good reason. Refused to denounce the straight-up racists that were rallying in Charlottesville, claiming that there were good people on both sides. Banning trans people from serving in the military. And tried to erase and made it easier to discriminate against trans people. Many people assumed the Lavender Party would just fizzle away because they got what they wanted with Obama legalizing gay marriage federally. But due to Lindell's actions, the party has only become even more relevant trying to protect gay marriage and trans people and everyone else under the gay umbrella. Lindell also founded the Space Force. He had very suspicious connections to the USSR leader Vladimir Putin. He became the first president to actually visit North Vietnam, and his pillows definitely totally weren't being made there. And totally didn't have a conflict of interest with his son still running the company. There was basically scandal after scandal with him, but for whatever reason he just seemed bulletproof. He tried getting Ukraine to find dirt on his political enemies, which had him nearly impeached. This is a pretty famous photo op between Lindell and his major coalition pals. The resistance of pudgy old people. And hilariously enough, all these people ended up turning on Lindell, such as the Farmer Labor Party that usually tends to be center-left under Alexander Acosta decided to side with Lindell in a coalition, but due to his connections to Jeffrey Epstein, he resigned, and the new leader of the Labor Party, Pete Buttigieg, immediately pulled the party out of coalition. So Lindell sought support with the States' Right Party, being the first time it was brought into government. Also, the new head of the Tea Party was the founder of Godfather's Pizza and local Uncle Ruckus, Herman Cain. Lindell also almost started World War III with Iran, and completely fumbled the response to the global pandemic, citing against science and people who actually know what they're talking about even after the death of Herman Cain. He didn't care about it, nor did he really care the mass amounts of injustices still faced by several Americans, leading to a larger scale peaceful protest by BLM, which Lindell met with the army. But what he did care about, it was an election year. This election saw the creation of very specific political parties. The Agrarian Populists, with a break off of the Greens and Farmer Labor, a isolationist populist party for farmers by farmers, and the Alternative for Medicine, a political party founded by Roseanne Barr. It's both an anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine mandate party, as well as being mostly big city conservatives who are really into health and think that sugar and seed oils are the devil while not really knowing anything about health.
These are the bars you want. Rose is chomping on right now. Do we see cane sugar? No.
Cane sugar, bad.
Almond and pecan clusters are on sale. These are nice, sweetened with just a touch of sugar.
Except in almond and pecan clusters.
No matter what type of sugar it is, do not eat it. I don't care if it's cane sugar.
Okay, never mind.
Sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, and canola oil. Run, Forrest, run.
Okay, grapeseed oil, bad.
I'm gonna drizzle in a couple teaspoons of grapeseed oil. grizzly bear style.
Except in potato pancakes.
Look for no gums, no emulsifiers.
Gums, bad.
I actually like this better than regular cow's milk ricotta. Look at the ingredients, clean as a whistle.
Gums, fine?
Bobby, you say avoid gums and emulsifiers when you can. When you can, I say, and because there's no gluten in here, they need a little bit of gum.
Gums, fine, when he says they are.
I always say read the ingredients first, and it has coconut water, but there's 1 gram of added sugar per serving.
1 gram of added sugar, bad.
How about a gluten-free cereal, but still made with whole grains, like gluten-free oats and sorghum, and only sweetened with 6 grams of sugar?
Oh!
If you think this is healthier than this, you would be wrong.
This is Troy. He has a very rare condition called lipodystrophy, where essentially he can't store body fat. Now, some of you are thinking, that sounds amazing. I can eat as many purple Ritos as I want and not gain weight. Well,
the little bit of fat on my body is behind my eyeballs and on my liver. So walking around not having fat, it feels like constant needles are poking through the bottom of your shoe.
So I get why many people have a negative view towards body fat, but while many people would look at someone on My 600-Pound Life and say, that is so unhealthy, I am sure many of those same people would look at this and go, wow, she looks great. This is also unhealthy because anything taken to the extreme is a problem. That is why I try and preach balance and doing everything in moderation. Unfortunately, many people will just never understand that, so I'm looking forward to all the negative comments on this video.
Joe Biden became the head of the NDP, much to a lot of people's chagrin, but people wanted someone that was not Lindell, so he ended up winning. Lindell threw a temper tantrum and basically tried everything possible to claim that this was rigged, even calling up the Fred the Secretary of State of Georgia, to find more votes that didn't exist. But there was no evidence of any widespread voter fraud. So his vice president from the NAR, Mike Pence, still sided with the fact that the election happened. But Lindell was still not happy with this, so he had a rally in front of the White House, taking up supporters until eventually he convinced domestic terrorists to try and coup the government in the Jan 6 attack, leading to 5 people dying. Democracy still prevailed, and he was impeached, again, which didn't really go anywhere, and Joe Biden was sworn in as the 48th president. Lindell was finally getting what he deserved for his nonsense. Now, Biden was very slow to actually persecute Jan 6 rioters, and didn't persecute Lindell. And of course, being an American politician, he said okay to Israel doing whatever they felt like. But with a slim majority in the House and Senate, Biden got passed. The Inflation Reduction Act, seeing the vaccine rollout and recovery from America being the fastest in the world to recover from the pandemic. The CHIPS and Science Act, which pushed for America to produce more microchips, as well as investing $165 billion in technology and science. Repealing the Defensive Marriage Act, protecting gay and interracial marriage, pushing for greater green energy and more respect and defense for gay people, sending aid to defend Ukraine from the invasion from the Soviet Union, and had the most diverse cabinet in American history, including Kamala Harris being the 3rd female vice president. But also was super old. And Americans were dealing with a lot of stagflation, and he only pulled out of the re-election campaign very late. Lindell, despite attempting to coup the government, still was able to run for president. Andrew Yang created a protest party, the Forward Party, still being aligned a lot with the Progressive Party, but he also wanted to straight up abolish the Electoral College and implement ranked choice voting, which is a great way of voting, and anyone who says otherwise is a moron. This is not to be confused with the Direct Democracy Party, the Pirate Party that's been around but not really relevant since the 2000s. But with the 2024 election, this has to be, minus the Reform Party, the most diverse election America's ever seen with candidates. For the first time ever in America, all the major parties, minus Reform, is ran by someone that isn't an old crusty straight white guy, representing America's ever-growing, ever-diversifying population, and this is beautiful. But who would you vote for? Let me know in the comments below, as well as hitting that like button and subscribe button.